Hi, and welcome to the Fuck It All podcast. My name is Kacie Lett Gordon, and I'm your host. This podcast is a conversation with modern women redefining what it means to have it all. And today, I'm not only your host, but I'm also your guest. And I can tell you, I'm having coffee. It's 8:45 on a Thursday morning. I just dropped my daughter off at school. And I can tell you there is nothing more awkward than sitting in your guest room by yourself, talking to yourself about yourself. So bear with me. I got a little nerves this morning, but I wanted to take the time to share a little context into who I am as your host of the podcast. What was the catalyst to start this, and how I'm actively redefining what it means to have it all for myself. So I'll start with where I am today. I am a 31-year-old mother of one. My daughter Tallulah is a year and a half. I am married to what I think is the best guy out there, Blake Gordon, and he and I've been together for 8 years, married for 4. And really, over the past 8 years, I think that, I have redefined what it means to have it all so many times over. And this version of it today, so much of it was the catalyst of having my daughter. But who I am today is what I'm most excited about. And these are the stories I want to tell. So I'll start from the beginning. I am from a smaller town in Virginia. I grew up outside of DC. My family is, modern at best. My mom and dad were both married prior, had children. 15 years or so later, got together and had me. Then they divorced, and my mom is remarried, and I have 2 stepsisters. So all in, we are 4 girls and 2 boys, plus all of their spouses. So we are a big crew. And I think that growing up in a blended family, you learn love and love as the first thing, and then a difference of opinion or different backgrounds as a second. And one thing I can say is, our crew, we don't agree on everything. We come from different experiences. We have very different, lives today, but we love each other immensely. And, we may disagree, but you better not say anything bad about someone, because we have their back, and we'll lay down the hammer. um, my parents, the relationship that I have. So I grew up really an only child with siblings much older than me. So I grew up with a lot of expectation, a lot of love, but a lot of expectation. I was the first one in my immediate family to get a 4-year degree and then go on to do my master's and move away. Most of my family still lives in Virginia, where I'm from. And I think early on, I recognized, both my parents came from very humble beginnings. My mom had a really rough childhood, and I knew how much expectation and hope they had for me. And early on, I found I derived so much joy and so much validation and identity from bringing them joy, helping them see that the world is bigger because of the things I was accomplishing. I had the chance, at 12 years old, to go to Europe on a student trip. I studied abroad in college. I was involved in clubs and sports. There was rarely a thing that they didn't encourage me to go do. Growing up, I did beauty pageants, and now I scoff at them a bit, but I'll tell you, I saw it as a way out. I saw it as an accelerant to where I wanted to go. And for me, growing up, what it all meant was a bigger life than what I had. It was being financial was always front and center to me, being financially sound, independent, having a career, being creative. Those were other big things for me. Um, I wanted to live in a city. I know that was a big part of it. I, in my mind, definitely had a partner. Kids played a role off and on. At one point, I was pretty adamant that I didn't want children. I just wanted the freedom to do whatever I wanted to do. And I reflect on that now, because when I met Blake, my now husband, it was so organic for me to want children with him. But at the time that I was really on that track of I just want it to be me, I wonder if it's because I did grow up with so many expectations that to be able to just do whatever my heart desired, that was it all. And it's funny, I was having a conversation on an episode yesterday, and as women, we so often, the roles around us define who we are: daughter, friend, sister, student, mother, boss, etc. And as we grow in our lives, you take on more of those roles. And I wonder, if I'm coming back to that younger version of myself now that says I may have taken on all these roles and I may have done a really good job, but I still yearn for that independence and that freedom. And I think that's maybe, it's been kind of cool to see myself come back to that. So that's where I grew up, and I was so ready to get out, and I think that excited my parents. I think they've always admired this desire to run, but I think it also scared them, of how much I wanted to get out. And I think that I, as a parent now myself, I have a lot of empathy for how that must have felt, a lot of pride, but also a lot of fear, because it's something so different than what they had. What I can say they both gave me was a super strong work ethic. My ambition has been one of the things that has defined me most prominently throughout my life. And for a while recently wanted to get away from ambition, but I actually don't think it's ambition that I want to get away from. I love that part of myself, but it's the expectation of what that ambition has to lead to. So if it's not super successful, if I'm not, a founder, if I'm not well known, then that means it's not successful. And I think I've had to separate those. I I've always been told, despite how ambitious and hardcore I can be about, academics or achievement, I've always been told from my parents, from boyfriends, from friends, that I'm too sensitive. And gosh, you're so sensitive. You take everything to heart. I didn't mean it that way. And for a while, I thought there was something, wrong with me. And what I've come to realize is my sensitivity is actually my magic. I feel so deeply for those around me, sometimes to my own detriment, but all the things that I feel in the negative side, I also feel on the positive side. And so, sensitivity allows me to see people. It allows me and my desire to be generous. I feel happiness deeply. And I've had to do a lot of work to make sure my sensitivity and my empathy doesn't become ruinous, because it can. I can feel so deeply. And sometimes, as someone who very much derives validation and self-worth from external approval, empathy can be a negative thing, because I have so often wanted to make other people happy, that if they were unhappy, even from something that I had no ability to control, that I took that as a commentary on my self-worth. I'll give a really tangible example. My dad is not in the best health, and for years I have played a role of caregiver and of cheerleader to do better. And his inability to want to get healthy has nothing to do with me. He loves me deeply. I think if, at his core, he does want to be around, but his inability to take his health seriously, to do certain things, I have felt as a personal failure. And I've had to do a lot of work to separate those, that you can feel sadness for someone else, but you don't have to feel responsibility. And divorcing those has been really helpful over my journey. And I sound super profound now. It's therapist words that I'm regurgitating here. So my it all has evolved. So let's start, like I said, at the beginning, it was very much achievement oriented. I wanted to get out. And so I saw two ways of doing that. I saw academics, an opportunity that, if I had my education, nobody could take that away from me. And I did beauty pageants, which I saw as an accelerant to reach where I wanted to go, which was in journalism. And so, but you have to recognize that academics is a super intensive, expectation environment. And then pageants are as well, is physically looking a certain way, having a certain polish, not saying the wrong thing, being diplomatic. And so those were some of the things that I think became ingrained in me very early on, as well as the expectation I carried, or the hope I carried of all those around me, that I was going to do something different. And I did in a lot of ways. And so fast forward to my early 20s, I moved to Atlanta. I did my undergrad at Virginia Tech, grad school at Elon in North Carolina. and then moved to Atlanta. Very early on, I made amazing friends here. I met my husband the very first weekend here, and what I thought was going to be a very transient moment in time in this city became really the foundation for who I am today. I graduated with about 100,000 in student loan debt, and so I was very motivated to pay that off. And I felt that if I can become financially sound, then that would be the freedom that I was looking for, because I would be a badass at my job. I thought that it would allow me to, have the lifestyle I wanted. And I went on about a 10-year sprint to do that. I last year paid off $100,000 in student loan debt. Right before I had my daughter, almost 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago, I was promoted to senior vice president of strategy. So I got a promotion as I was going out on maternity leave, which, I mean, that was a moment of, if I have it all, fuck yeah, I do. And then, I was the breadwinner in our family. We bought a beautiful home in a great neighborhood, like all of the things on paper that you would say, like, damn, she's got it going on. Yet there have been several moments over the 8 years my husband and I have been together, and God love him because he's a trooper through it, that I have fell into deep depression. I have fell into, days that I cannot get out of bed. I have, I'm very cautious with how I say this, not suicidal thoughts, but certainly thoughts of understanding how people get there. My anxiety being so high, just feeling like I'm almost on vibrate, like this energy. And I did a lot of work, when I first realized that I wanted to become a mother, which was probably about 4 years ago when my husband and I got married. I had a nervous breakdown because I said, I am so neurotic. I am so wired to be achievement oriented. I'm so ambitious that I don't have any room in my life to have a child. And I would be doing a disservice to bring a kid into this environment. And so I put, I'm a big person, a big resolution person. Every year, I don't necessarily say what I want to achieve, but I say, what do I want more of? And what do I want to let go of? And that year I wanted more space to allow room to bring in what would be my daughter. And I focused on that a lot. I did a lot of therapy. God love my therapist. My husband and I actually just started going to her for couples therapy, which I strongly recommend. But that meant I had to give her up as my personal therapist. So I'm mourning the loss of my beloved Dr. Wallace. And I got a coach. I worked with a career coach, and I found out that there was power in asking for what I wanted. I'll give an anecdote, and this is the first time I started to realize my power as a person, not just as all the expectations put on me. About a year before I had my daughter, I knew that I eventually wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew I wanted to have something of my own. And so I was really restless at my job, and I went to my boss at the time, and I feel for anybody that's managed me, because no doubt I require a lot. I have a lot of expectation and need, but I've had some awesome bosses who have poured into that, and honestly, some not so awesome bosses who have found that overwhelming. But with that, I shared with him pretty honestly what I needed. I said, I need to have ownership of something. I need to feel like I have something of my own. And to his credit, he said, okay, you can have, full reign over this part of the business. What if you could have that be yours? You could be the face of this part of our organization. And that freedom and that empowerment that came, one, somebody believed in me, but two, I believed in myself enough to ask for what I wanted. There's one of my favorite Madonna quotes is, most people don't get what they want because they don't ask for what they want. And so that lesson in saying, just ask, the worst they can say is no, was one of the first steps for me in redefining what it meant to have it all, because I started to get a lot more self-worth that didn't come from someone else, but by keeping the promise to myself that I was gonna honor what I needed to be happy. So I'm jumping around a lot, and hopefully you're having as much coffee as I am so you can follow. um, so this is okay. We're in 2020 now. That's probably 2017, 18 that I'm having these conversations. 2018, I get pregnant with my daughter. 2019, I have her. like I said, I was promoted right before I went out. So I'm feeling on top of the world, right? I have an amazing husband, beautiful home, kick-ass job, great salary. I'm off with the coolest chick I've ever known, which is my daughter. And I feel super empty. I go back to work September of last year, and I think I had maybe some late onset postpartum, and I fall into a pretty dark depression by the end of the year. It all came to a head for me in late December, early January, and thank God I had a really strong support system that I was able to share this with. But I was driving home from work, and I was going to get on the 75-85 southbound ramp, for those of you that are in Atlanta, so the main highway. And I had this flicker of a moment that just said, what if I don't make the turn and I just keep going and run off the rails? And it wasn't, again, I'm so cautious with talking about suicide. I have people in my, life that have gone through that, and it's not no matter to take lightly, but it was a moment that I said, I wish something bad would happen to me so I did not have to be the one to disappoint everyone around me by saying I didn't want this anymore. The job, I had been, building something new, but when I came back, I was just running it and I didn't feel the same fulfillment. I felt like my priorities had shifted. I seriously thought, do I want to be a stay-at-home mother, which had never occurred to me. And honestly, I felt like a failure. Like, what a waste of potential that you want to stay home now. I was pretty fucking furious that I felt that way. Like, what was society's expectations that the most natural thing of a mother wanting to be with her child felt like a failure? And I was so worried that my husband, who loves, and had fallen in love with this ambitious, passionate, hardcore woman, would he still love me the same if I was no longer her? And so I was in this identity crisis, and I truly wanted something terrible to happen. There's a great scene if you watch Working Moms on Netflix. It's a Canadian show, and there's one of the women, Frankie. She talks about motherhood, and she said, it's like you're on a plane and you're looking out and it's so beautiful, and then you just want to crash into a side of a mountain, and you don't want like to die, but you would take like a 10-day coma. And at the time I first watched that, I just had my daughter. I thought, oh my God, that bitch is crazy. And then by the time the end of year came, I said, like, I'm Frankie. And so I came home that day and I told my husband, I said, listen, I thought about driving off the side of the road. And he said, okay, this is not sound. We got to come up with a plan. I also told dear friends of mine that had crossed my mind, and I wasn't in a good place. And again, asking for what you want, just being honest. I had people around me that loved me deeply that said, as soon as they heard that, they said, fuck everything else. Whatever you need to, this world doesn't exist and our happiness doesn't exist if you're not here. That's what Blake said. He said, I fell in love with you, and yeah, that version of you may be gone, but you not here, that doesn't make sense in my world. And that clicked to me. And I also thought about my daughter, like, Glennon Doyle, I'm doing so many quotes today, but Glennon Doyle has in her book Untamed, is that motherhood, you are a role model, not a martyr. And that to me is, I've taken that on so heavily of, since becoming a mom, any of the things I'm faced with, I think about it through the lens of, would I want my daughter to feel the same pressure? Would I want her to feel so terrified to disappoint me that she would live an unhappy life? God, that brings me to tears almost. The answer is no, I don't want that. And so I went on a journey starting this year. I've been on so many journeys, gosh, so many fuck it all moments, but my it all, I just wrote down what I want. At the beginning part of this year, I have it dated, I think it's like January 20th. I wrote down a list of probably 2 pages worth of things I wanted. And these were things all the way from, I want to leave the company I'm at to start a business focused on women, to I want more intimacy and date nights with my husband, to I want to have one-on-one time with my best friend, and I want to call and catch up with my sisters. And it was, there was nothing too small or too large on this list. And I put the list away, and then I went back to work. Coronavirus hits the world in March. I kind of say, okay, Kacie, you just got to stay put because we don't know what's going on with the world. But on those notes, I wrote that in July, by mid-year, I would leave 352, the company I was at the time, and I would go start something for women. And wouldn't you know it, that August 1st, I told my boss that I was going to resign, first week of August, that I needed to resign. And I stumbled across this journal the week prior to that. And I said, holy shit, I put this out in the world. And this was, my first experience with kind of manifesting what I wanted. And I went through that list, and, if there were 100 items on there, I'd checked off 85 organically without even thinking of them. But because I had written them down, I think there's a stat that if you write something down, you're 42% more likely to do it. And they put it in terms of, if you had cancer and they told you something that you did was 42% likelihood to cure you, why wouldn't you do it? And so I wrote it down, and I've put that into practice since, of, writing down both gratitude and things that I want. And I'm very specific in that. And so I put it out in the world that July I wanted to leave. August I did. September 18th was my last day. Today is what is it? November 5th. So I'm about 45, maybe 50 days out. And wouldn't you know it, a handful of days after leaving that company and, having absolutely an identity crisis, I started concepting fuck it all. And I did an Instagram post, and I wrote a piece about it. But my coach and dear friend here in Atlanta, I said, the idea of creating excites me. If I say that word, I get energized. But the idea of building, it causes me to shut down. It terrifies me. And she said, then stop. Creating is for yourself. Building is for some external expectation. And so when I think about what it all means for me right now, it means that I am actively creating for no end state. I am just doing it for myself. And yes, there may hit a point in time where, the bills have to be paid, and my lovely husband says, go get a paying job. But my hope is that by being me, my two values, if I think Brené Brown tells you have to break it down to two. Mine are honesty or authenticity; those interchange, and to be known. And so, if I can, my it all is to be myself and be known for that. And I have found that by in doing that, I've just been flooded with so many stories of women. Honestly, I announced the podcast. I sent it to my network of just, personal friends, family, colleagues here in Atlanta and beyond. And I instantly had at least 50 stories. And that to me shows that we need representation, because for me, I looked at those around me and I didn't see people having these honest conversations. And so as I was going through my journey, I felt super alone. I felt blackout depressed. I felt like a failure. I felt like my parents would think I'm stupid for giving away financial security, and I would disappoint them because all their hopes and dreams had been on me, getting this certain kind of life, and my husband wouldn't love me the same. And these were all stories I was making up in my head. And the truth is even if they felt that way, I'm going to hurt someone. I'm going to hurt them, or I'm going to hurt myself. And at the end of the day, the relationship with myself, I was doing this exercise the other day. If you had to stack rank, woman, sister, friend, mother, wife, how would I do it? And I felt guilty for a second because mother and wife didn't fall first, but I actually put woman first because I am me first. And none of those other things work if I'm not in touch with who I am. So I'm woman first. I'm mother second. I am wife third. um, I am friend, activist, sister, and I don't mean sister just by blood, because I've got lots of them that are, my sisterhood is big, and um, daughter is in there, but self is first. And I think that as women, that's something we struggle with, because just put yourself first. Um, selflessness is one of the biggest compliments historically that we've been able to get as women. And how awful that in order for us to be seen as the all being woman, that we have to be selfless, that to care for yourself, to invest in yourself, to put yourself first is seen as a flaw. I know I look at my daughter and yeah, I want her to be kind and compassionate and empathetic, but I want her to care about herself, because you know what? If she doesn't, nobody else will. And the way we treat ourselves is the bare minimum that other people will treat us. And so if you treat yourself like shit, you better believe others will too. And my hope is that this podcast is representation. It's representation of not just me. Listen, I'm a white woman, highly educated, privileged, live in metro city. cis relationship, have a daughter, been able to have children. I want to hear from women who are women of color, who are part of the LGBTQ plus community. I want to hear from women who chose not to have children or get married, or maybe can't. God, that's a journey that within itself that I know so many women. And I want to hear, I want to hear the ugly, because we are all just getting through this thing called life, right? And I would hate for my daughter to not be any of the things that I am and feel like she is a failure. So I'm doing this for her. She's my why. You'll hear me talk about her a lot. I'm doing this for every time I have sat in bed, blackout depressed, because I felt like a failure even when I wasn't. And I'm doing it because I desperately need accountability. And by telling you all my story, I'm hopeful that I will feel like I'm part of something bigger than me. And this is the week of the US elections. Being a mother made me an activist. We'll have a whole session on that later. But we're all part of, this, we are all part of something bigger. And I think that, to recognize that a mindset of abundance versus scarcity, if we all recognize that we can be abundant with our love, with our care, with our views, I wonder what world we leave for our kids. So I've rambled, but I hope have given you some context into who I am. We've jumped around a lot. I won't lie. I had, probably 3 cups of very caffeinated coffee. I'm wearing some silver snakeskin boots. I had to channel some good energy up in here. I am so grateful for everything you guys are letting me build and everything that you're going along with. This is Kacie Lett Gordon. I am the host and the guest of today's Fuck It All podcast. This is a place where modern women talk about redefining what it means to have it all. I'm grateful you're here, and I'll see you next time.